So welcome back, guys, and to another episode in this particular mini series. I think this is the last set of the last video in this particular series. We will definitely have Philip on for future episodes, and especially with next summer with the FIFA World Cup, FIFA Women's World Cup happening in Brazil as well. Definitely would love to have him on, especially talking about the Scandinavian countries which should qualify for for that tournament. I would hope they would qualify for that. But yeah, like I think it has been. I just want to start off by saying, Philip O'Connor, it's been a pleasure having you on for like these videos. You've given a lot of insight, especially on the ground, and I think the viewers to this video will be noticing a very different background to what they've seen. I would like to give context that Philip is back in Sweden, back home, and I'm guessing you're feeling a little bit. It's a mixed feelings, right? You're in the withdrawal from covering such a big event, and also like a little bit of that relaxation of covering such a big event as well, I guess, right?
Yeah, it's very odd altogether, Ashish. And I kind of hate this because, you come home from a big event and all of a sudden you have to make your own breakfast and there's no press conferences, there's no games, there's no wall to wall TV, there's no Kevin De Bruyne in a mix zone and Erling Haaland over here, and that kind of thing. There's like a 9 hour time difference from Vancouver to Stockholm. But just to sort of lift the curtain a little bit on the way things work for me, I left before Norway did, right? So when I was there to cover the games in Vancouver and the effect of the World Cup on the city of Vancouver and that kind of thing, but also to cover Norway and Sweden and that kind of thing, because I speak the languages, I know the players and the coaches and the teams and their tactics. So I came home and I kind of had to stay on Vancouver time ahead of the game against England, which is nearly a week ago now, if not a week ago. Yeah, a week ago, I think it was. So I kind of had to stay on that time. And then, of course, I was covering Conor McGregor's return to mixed martial arts, which lasted all of
Oh,
69 seconds. So I haven't recovered at all. So as we're talking here, it's the evening in Scandinavia. I have no idea. My body and my brain have no idea what time it is. So I was just holding this up to the screen there. My Gianni sold me this lovely FIFA World Cup 2026 mug.
yeah.
That has been full of copy literally every waking moment since I got back to get through it. But it has been a wonderful tournament. And I mean, if we look away from the politics of it and the way the Iranian teams were treated and the fact that a Somali referee wasn't allowed into the country, the actual football has delivered. 48 teams, maybe there's a few of them that shouldn't have been there. Sweden, I'm looking at you. Austria, you're hiding in the corner there as well. But it has been a tremendous experience. And it's always sad when it's coming to the climax now. But of course, the last two games that are there, we have a great final and indeed a great third place playoff to look forward to.
Yeah, definitely. I think like I just want to put in this joke. It was all around the internet in the aftermath of McGregor's fight. Bam Adebayo threw more punches in Las Vegas compared to McGregor. So there's that as well. So like just to
It
pull in
was
my
it was
NBA like
it was
this is
absolutely incredible. If ever there was a thing, we're looking at a sort of, he's also a year younger than Leo Messi. So I think while they're both in the same time zone there, while Connor's in Las Vegas,
wow.
Leo Messi is 39, Conor McGregor was 38 the other day. So, and I mean, Conor has, a little bit of clout there. So I'm sure he can call up Messi and say, hey, brother, have you any tips for, doing the spectacular at this age? I'm sure he can learn a lot there.
Yeah, definitely. But like, I mean, it is like just to like digress from the moment regarding this McGregor thing. He's not been fighting for a bit. I mean, I'm not into the mixed martial arts scene. So what is the context with regard to that?
Yeah, so basically, he returned to the UFC, Ashish, after a 5 year absence. It was five
Yeah.
years almost to the day. The last time he was in the UFC, he suffered a broken leg fighting against Dustin Poirier. So he
Okay.
kicked Dustin's leg. There was a little sort of a crack in the bone. And then when he went to stand on it, his ankle basically broke. So
Okay.
5 years it took him to get over that. Now, he was supposed to come back. He broke a toe. He had a fight booked against Michael Chandler, didn't come back. And then in the fight that he had the other day, like basically he came out and he tried this jumping, spinning switch kick, landed wrong on his other leg this time, his right leg this
Okay.
time, and basically blew out his knee. I mean, the speculation I've heard, and a few footballers have actually been in touch to say what happened to him looked like what they call a bucket handle meniscus tear. So, the handle on a bucket, the way it looks, and when it
Yeah.
pops out from one side, and you can't
Yeah.
carry it
Correct.
anymore.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's what happened to Mr. McGregor there. But oddly enough,
Wow.
actually, there is a link to football there because in the time that Conor was recovering from the broken leg, he actually started playing soccer for his local club side in Dublin again.
Oh,
And
okay.
there was stuff on the internet. If you go back to his Instagram and that kind of thing. Also, like Leo Messi, a left footer, not going to put them in the same class there. But as far my reports on the ground that I've received from Dublin are that there were no goals and no assists, despite plenty of efforts from Mr. McGregor to get himself on the score sheet. It didn't happen in the last season he played.
I would say like, a little more closer to how Ronaldo's tournament went in the 2026 World Cup. Let's put it that way, like yeah,
Yeah,
from that perspective.
it's been a difficult one. Do you know, I was just thinking of this actually before we sort of started to speak, and it's one of the themes of this tournament, and especially since England went out in the semi-finals or are going into the third and fourth place playoff now, it will come as news to nobody that they lost to Argentina the other night. But there has been, or there is a sort of a passing of the torch going on towards the end of this tournament. Okay, can we really see Ronaldo coming back in another 4 years' time when he be 41 or what he be 45 maybe by then?
45, yeah.
Leo Messi 39, he'll be 43. Harry
Yeah.
Kane is probably over the hill now. Lewandowski, Robert Lewandowski, who didn't even make the tournament, he's not going
Yeah.
to be around. So there's a whole generation of absolutely brilliant attacking players, and this was the last dance for them. Now, Ronaldo obviously scored from the penalty spot. He got in there, he did his thing. But I think what we've finally seen here is that we've seen an amazing era over the last 20 years, the Messi and Ronaldo era there, where these guys have had, the pinnacle of sports science, of nutrition, of,
Yeah.
all sorts of, how you keep your body, recovery. We've heard that LeBron James spends $1 million a year just
On
on
his
his
body.
body alone. And okay, he can afford it. Me and you probably can't. But we're coming to the end of that era now, and we're handing off to the likes of, Lamine Yamal, who's coming up now. Is it Saka maybe? There's a whole bunch of young players coming through now. But it really is, the end of an era for like a certain soccer era that we're witnessing here now. And I wonder, especially now that Spain are back to where they were in 2010, they're back in the World Cup final again. And you're kind of looking for a sign from this World Cup final of where do we go from here?
Yeah, I think so. Like, it is a very curious final as well, right? Like, I think this is the first time, of course, we're going to go into detail about the final in a bit, but I think the first time in 60 years that Spain and Argentina are facing each other competitively. Like, I think they might have played each other in, friendlies and, of course, and also this is the first time that the reigning European champion is facing the reigning South American champion, like, or basically both the reigning continental champions are facing off against each other. So it is a very
Yeah,
interesting thing. Like, I mean, I don't think a lot of people had Spain this particular matchup on their bingo card. Like, let's put it that way.
no,
I think a lot of other matchups were more, like, of course the rematch from 2022 was like hyped up, but I think this is it's a very interesting final. And I don't know, like, of course, we will speak on it, but I think first we need to talk, we need to do a little bit of a Viking funeral for how Norway played against England. And I actually was totally disappointed. Like, honestly, like, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. If Norway were playing the semi-final against Argentina, like, supposedly, I mean, in our perfect alternative universe, let's put it that way, uh, I don't think they would have capitulated like how England did, and that's just a personal opinion. But I genuinely think they would have, you know, like, given, like, or not allowed, Leo Messi the whole entire space of the Atlanta, the Mercedes-Benz Arena to just pick out his man in whatever. I don't know, just a thought, but yeah, I think
I
you
have
can.
to say, my WhatsApp and my DMs on Instagram and everything are just full of Norwegian people in the game there, thinking about what might have been. Because when you look at the way England performed there and how they sort of, authors of their own downfall, Anthony Gordon scores in the 55th minute. All of a sudden, England just back to home, back to home, back to home, and tried to defend and tried to defend. And Norway were looking at that and going, because what killed England wasn't trying to defend on the edge of their own box, right?
Yeah,
It was the fact that they couldn't get the ball up the field. They had no counter-attacking prowess, right?
yeah,
Norway had five wingers, I would say, right? So you had Sørloth, you had Nusa, you had Bob, you had Sheldon, and you had Jens Petter Hauge, who only played 7 minutes. He plays for Bodø Glimt, only played 7 minutes the
yeah.
whole tournament. That's five players that are capable of, you can just roll those players in and out of the production line, and you can counter-attack against any team in the world with that, which is essentially what Norway came to this World Cup trying to do. And they were looking at that Argentina game and going, "Oh man, we wouldn't give for a crack at that." And it's kind of sad in a way because when England get to that point, right, and it's very indicative of the way coaching works and the way the media works and the way the football world works, that when England scored that goal, Anthony Gordon scored that goal, and it was an incredible defensive lapse. I can't remember who was supposed to be on the back post, but they saw whoever was defending there saw Anthony Gordon coming in
Yeah,
and then just ignore him. As if,
yeah.
what's he going to do? Disappear, go up in smoke? And of course, he turns up there and he scores that goal. But then there was
Good
something
finish, by the
very
way. A
odd.
really good finish, I felt.
Oh, it was a great finish. But again, when you have the time to do that, because there's no body on you, there's no physical
Yeah,
contact, you're not under any pressure. A great player, a very good winger like Anthony Gordon is going to score that. But for the Norwegians to go out on their shield like that, I mean, in one way, it was absolutely brilliant. First World Cup since 1998. Never won a
exactly.
knockout game before. But really struggled to score in 1994 and 1998. Remember when Ireland played Norway in 1994? It was one of the worst games I've ever seen in the World Cup. And keep in mind that I'm Irish and I have a great love of all things Norwegian as well. And I still hate that game of football. I watched it a couple of times since, and it's even worse than I originally imagined.
Mm.
And to see that then, to see them grow into that. But the interesting thing is that what's left on the table there, that opportunity that they missed, the opportunity to take on Messi, to go out there and to do their thing. Now, there's a problem with depth in the Norwegian squad. Wingers, they've loads
Mm.
of great wingers. They don't have loads of great defenders. They
Mm.
finally got their midfield right when they brought Patrick Bay off the bench to start games, later on in the knockout rounds and that kind of thing. But up until then, they sort of struggled a little bit. But again, their best years, I think, and the best years of Holland and probably Otherwood are still ahead of them. They still have
Yeah,
another two World Cup cycles that they can go back and change these things. And there are an awful lot of young, gifted, technical players who are coming through in Norway. So when they get, the European Championship qualifying campaign, and when they get that, the chance to play with these guys together, I think I mean, hundreds of thousands of people turned out the other day when they arrived back in Oslo, and rightfully so, and heralded them. And now the football season there, of course, it's they play spring to autumn. So the men's league has started up again, the women's league has started up again. They're already back to work. The guys at Bodø Glimt, Jens Petter Hauge, Fredrik Bjørken, he's back to work. And Patrick Barry, they're all back to work. There was no break for these guys
yeah,
whatsoever, just straight back into football. And for Norwegian football, that's very important because now they
mm.
can take that momentum and they can continue on in their domestic season. And I think it's only about 36 or 37 days until the Premier League starts again. So they can keep that up there. But a huge World Cup for Norway. And something else that's worth noting is they provided the template for literally everybody else in the world for how to play football at this point in time. That
Yeah,
idea of sitting there, well organized, fit, well drilled, and then hitting teams on the break, that's a template that any country in the world could use.
yeah, definitely. I think like, I mean, I was like before the tournament started, like me and Sai, we had like this draft of, we were each picking 24 teams each to, and we were assigning points to it. And Sai was lucky enough to pick Norway, but I mean, I kind of underestimated them, and also like I was waiting to see because this is their first World Cup in a while, and also like they had not, like you had mentioned, they had not won a single knockout game until then. So like they are the sort of team which you would think people would overrate a lot and then they would underwhelm. But I think they played. I think they I mean like relative to their talent level or their squad level compared to a lot of other teams, I think they performed brilliantly. It's just that a few bounces here and there, and literally it just took a spider cam, the wiring of a spider cam, camera just to concede the equalizer to
Yep.
Bellingham, and the nonsensical call to overrule Haaland's. I mean the second goal which Norway scored, and I mean it is a foul in the classical sense, but sometimes it's all about common sense also in certain cases. And why the fuck is sorry to, apologies for my French there, but why the fuck is uh I would say Elliot Anderson would be 6 foot on a good day, or 5'11" at max on a good day. Why is he matched up against a 6'5" Norwegian like man mountain? And why is the matchup like that? Why is not like a person like John Stones handling that? And that is my major issue with that entire goal. It's like you're
Do you
punishing a
know? And
man for being big. It's like the Shaq
yeah,
rules, like yeah, like that.
well, that's it. And it's also that thing of, if you're looking at contacts in the box and fouls in the box and that kind of thing, right? One of the things that they did well at this World Cup was that they called out those fouls,
Yeah,
absolutely. But that what the referee should have been doing, at least half of those, they could have given penalties, okay? Because everybody is doing the same thing, It's not just attackers pushing defenders, A defender now, if somebody puts their hands on you, you just sit down, and
yeah.
that's it. And then you get the free out. And we saw an awful lot of that going on there. I think, who was it? In the French game. Oh, sorry. When France played against Spain there, and you saw Lamine Yamal winning a penalty there, which absolutely it was a penalty.
It is a
But
penalty. Yeah,
this is a natural footballing thing. It wasn't deliberate. The player isn't
yeah,
looking at the ball. He tried to clear the ball, and the next thing the guy is there, it's a penalty. Okay,
yeah.
common sense would say just get on with it. It was a
Yeah,
dangerous play. It hit him around the hip or that kind of thing.
yeah,
If it hits him in the face, fine, I can understand that. But that thing about Norway was very interesting because there were three moments there. You've mentioned two of them. One was the disallowing of the goal,
yeah.
which I think that would that have put Norway 2-1 up at that
Yes, they
point?
would have been 2-1. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and then the other was when they hit the camera wire, which is another thing. Now that was fascinating because in the middle of that game, we were reporting on the game. We were onto FIFA straight away, going, "Okay, we're hearing rumors that hit the wire," and FIFA came back with one of those brilliant FIFA answers saying that, "Okay, so the sensor in the ball didn't detect anything," and straight away I was saying, "But the antennas for the sensor in the ball are at ground level." Okay, they're on the sideline. They're literally this far above ground level. How in the name of God are they going to pick something that's 60 meters up in the air? So that answer in itself, whilst it is an answer, I mean, they didn't pick up anything. That's fine. That's not to say the ball didn't hit the wire. Okay. But again, that's beside the point. Stole a soul back and sort of looked at that and went, okay, it's 50-50.
I
The
know.
big turning point for me there, Ashish, where Norway lost that game was
Yeah,
when Alexander Sørloth had the ball coming down the right hand side,
yeah,
right?
yep,
Alexander Sørloth plays as a centre forward for Atletico Madrid. His nose is a little bit out of joint because Haaland is obviously the man. What are you going to say to Ståle Solbakken? And no, I'm better than him. Sit down, son. You're not getting that, right? So he was employed to play out on the wing, left footer, right? So Solbakken likes left footer on the right wing, a right footer on
yeah,
the left wing. And Sørloth could have let the ball go. The instant I saw him with the ball, I was like, okay, you got to play that straight away to Haaland.
yeah,
It would have landed on his left foot. I think we all know what's likely to happen if Haaland gets that ball, right? He chose not to do it, and the window closed like that.
yeah,
And that, to me, is where Norway's World Cup ended, okay? Because if they went 2-0 up there for exactly the reason we spoke about, their ability, those five wingers that they can put in there in the counter attack, they would have made England pay for that, and they might have even won. That would have made it 2-0. They might have even won 3-0 at that point. Sørloth didn't play that pass. And I hate to say it because this is a team game. Teams win and lose together, right?
the
But Sørloth's decision in that moment not to do that costs the team. It's that simple.
yeah,
And I think that, it's a shame, as I say, it's down to no one individual. We have to look at the whole thing over time. But if there was one turning point of their whole tournament, that to me was where they stamped their ticket home from the tournament. But the great thing is that for a team like that to even get that close, right? We're in the rare air here. It's like climbing the foothills of the Himalayas, right? You're like trying to climb Mount Everest. You can get to base camp and then you realize how much there is still left to do before you get to the summit. And that's what's so good for this generation of Norwegian players because they will go back to their clubs. They will go back to Manchester City, but they'll also go back to Fulham and to Bodø Glimt. And they would say, we have seen where the summit is. We now know what it takes to get there. Can we get there? I don't know. But
yeah,
here's what we need to do to try. And I think that that's going to be the big learning of this from Norway. It's like, okay, now we know what it's like to be in among the big boys. And the important thing, again, Ståle Solbakken said this in his final press conference, we feel that we belong here. And often that's the case. I'm sure if you ask the Cape Verde players, for instance, do you feel that you belong there? Half of them would say yes, and the other half would say, man, I'm delivering post on Monday morning. Of course I don't belong here, kind of thing. So there are differences there, but the Norwegians have seen that and they're thinking, yeah, we do actually belong here. And certainly when they get back to Europe now and into the European Championships and the Nations League and all these things, that I think we're going to see them. I've seen them progress immensely over the last decade or so, and I
yeah,
expect that not just to continue, but to even to increase in pace in the coming months.
yeah, definitely. I think like now the next signpost in Norway is like, progression would be, of course, I think, okay, remind me in which league are Norway in the Nations League? Are they in League A or League B? Like, it gets
I
confusing at,
I think they're up to League A now because like the last few years they've been unbeatable.
yeah,
World Cup
correct.
qualifying, and that kind of thing.
Exactly.
So I think they're up in League A, and if they're not, they'll be there very soon. Which is
Yeah.
pretty good going.
Yeah. So I think like probably if they are in League A, for instance, probably try and top one of the groups which are there in that and maybe make a semi-final there. I know it's like I consider it to be a little bit of a tin pot trophy, and it is like a trophy which is made for nonsensical reasons. But for a team like Norway, it is a chance at silverware, definitely a chance for them. And of course, like the Euros in 2 years' time, which they possibly could have a chance of getting revenge on England's home soil as well. So there is that as well. So there is added incentive as well. And I think opportunity also for you to go back to your homeland as well, because Ireland also hosting the Euros, if I'm not wrong.
They are indeed. Ireland, Wales, and England, I think, are the three host nations for
Scotland
that.
as well, yeah.
Do you know what? It's actually very interesting, Ashish, because like if we look at these smaller nations, and we mentioned Norway, we mentioned Cape Verde there as well, And Ireland is an interesting one because we're dealing with a sort of a parallel reality there again, right? We have to go back 10 years. 10 years ago, I was in, where was I? Somewhere, it was I in Lyon for the Euros. And that was the time the
Yes,
Brexit vote took place, right? And
correct.
one of the results of Brexit was that, obviously Great Britain left the EU. The guys I would have played with, when I played football in Ireland growing up, I played at a reasonably decent level. Now, I was never good enough to go on trial to an English club myself, but an awful lot of guys that I played with, one week they were on trial at Aston Villa or at Glasgow Celtic in Scotland or Blackburn Rovers, Bolton Wanderers, Arsenal, these kinds of places. And because Ireland and England were sort of so tightly knit together and both were members of the EU, it was the easiest thing in the world for guys to go over. Since
Mm.
Brexit, that's gone, right? So what
Okay.
does the result of that now is that Irish football is sort of trying to find its way, it's trying to navigate this new normal, if you like. So
Okay.
players can't go over at 14, 15, 16 anymore as they did when I was young. So now they have to wait until they're 18 to go over. I think, well,
Mm.
maybe 17, I think, at the earliest. But so they
Yeah.
go over much later, maybe 2, 3 years later. But also it means the players stay longer in the Irish domestic league, which is where Pico Lopez, who played for Cape Verde, he's played his whole career in that league. And now I just saw that a player from the Irish league from a club called Shelbourne there has just signed for Benfica. So now
Mm.
Irish players are not only looking to the English and Scottish leagues for their careers, but they're looking to, Troy Parrott playing in Netherlands and playing in
Yeah.
Portugal and playing in Italy. Some of them it's not working out because there's a big cultural difference. If you're coming from an English speaking nation, it was always very easy to go from Dublin to Durham or to go to London and to play over there because at least you spoke the language. Even if the
Yeah.
likes of Liam Brady back when he went to Arsenal in the 1960s and 70s, he really suffered from homesickness there. So it is a different cultural landscape. And some of them have struggled and some of them end up coming back to British football or to Irish football. But I think in time there, but this is an interesting thing as well, which we'll speak about when we speak about England, is the cultural context of football is very, very important in the international game, right? And
Mm.
that's where I think Norway and Cape Verde, more than anybody else, embody the changes that they've made in approach to the game, right?
Yeah.
Norwegian football has always been 4-4-2, kick and rush, physical, until about 10 or 15 years ago. And then all of a sudden they said, okay, this is not how football is played anymore. You can't pass the ball directly to the keeper and then just hoof it over the top of the defense. Midfielders would be standing there. The most common injury for a Norwegian midfielder for all of my life was getting a crick in their neck from watching the ball fly over their head kind of thing. They would literally never get their foot on the ball. But that changed. And now we see a Martin Ødegaard. Like the most mind-blowing thing from this World Cup is Norway dictated the game with the ball against Brazil. In what world is this even possible? But that's where modern football is at the moment. And I tell you something, my man, I'm here for it.
Yeah, definitely. I think also like just a little bit of to digress a bit as well. I think also like a lot of the nations are also embracing the multiculturalism. Like they are picking from the little bit of the immigrant countries. Like take for example Norway as well. Like for instance, like you're having a person like Oscar Bob and Antonin Nusa, not really the typical you know imagery which comes to mind when you think about Norwegian players. You think tall blokes, white as hell,
Blonde hair, blue eyes.
blonde hair, blue eyes, everything. The typical. I don't want to go into that, but yeah, the typical. There are typical tropes for Norwegian players, and I think the embrace. I think the very wholehearted embrace of these players and integrating them also into the national setup. Like I think maybe a decade back, probably players of the like of Nusa and Bob probably wouldn't have not have been able to make the breakthrough. But I think the only player of color before that was I think John Carew, if I'm not wrong, like
John
who
Carter
was
was one of the only players of colour there. And it's an interesting point that you raised, of course, because ahead of the game between Spain and France, there was, I think, a parliamentarian in Spain who said it. And indeed, there was a senator from Paraguay said a similar thing.
yeah
But they're saying, look
Mariano
at the French
Rajoy,
team.
the former prime minister for Spain, and
Yeah,
that lunatic senator
yeah.
from Paraguay. Yeah,
And they're looking at the French team and they're saying these guys aren't French. I go, hang on a second. Actually, they are. And the same
yeah,
thing as you say with Nusan, with Oscar Bob and these players as well. And I wrote about halfway through the World Cup, I wrote a column for a local news agency here, which is literally, it's only for this sort of postcode that I live in Stockholm,
yeah,
right? And the column I wrote, I called it, "This is the World Cup of the Immigrant." Because all of like if you look at the players who played for Sweden, right? The players who played up front there, you had Alexander Isak, you had Gyökeres, whose roots I think are in Hungary. You had
yeah,
Dejan Kulusevski, who was injured. You had Anthony Elanga, whose father's from Africa. You had so many players, and you had the Nielsen Lindelof, and you had all these other players as well. You had Zinedine Zidane, who played for France and won the World Cup in 1998. You had his son playing for Algeria. as the whole thing goes full circle, right?
Yeah,
You have so many players from Portugal who are, eligible to play for other countries. You had players from Suriname who are playing for Netherlands and that kind of thing. And this to me is fascinating because nowhere is it, because it's sport and because we want to win, not at all costs, but we want to put everything we can into winning. We're looking at, okay, where do we get the players to do this? Ireland in the 1980s, under an English coach named Jack Charlton, started to look at the Irish diaspora, right? So that would be my children, my children's children, to see if they were eligible for and interested in playing for Ireland at that point. Pico Lopez is born and raised in Dublin, played on the same streets as I did growing up, right? And yet he's part of the Cape Verdean diaspora and ended up playing there. Like all of Argentina, basically, most of the players that they would have there, there's very few indigenous Argentinians in the Argentinian squad. They're
correct.
all
Yeah,
third and fourth and fifth generation Europeans. There was, of course, the fantastic debate in Brazil around whether or not the fact that the team is no longer successful. It depends on the fact that there's too few Catholics in the team. It's all evangelical Christians. And
yeah,
to be honest, I love those debates, Ashish, because it says more about the game and society, because to me the World Cup is about holding up a mirror to ourselves. Who is the best version of Ireland, of England, of Sweden, of Norway, of Brazil,
exactly.
of Argentina, of Cape Verde, Algeria, Morocco, all of these, even Qatar, who brought in some players from outside as well and naturalized them. And it leads to a debate that is not just to do with football, it's to do with society as a whole. And not only that, but it's how do we work together? Okay, people who've been here on this land for 1,000 years and people who arrived on a boat a decade ago. How do we bring all these people together? It is probably the most modern debate, the most modern societal issue that's out there. And to look at players from different countries, to look at players from Argentina and from Spain and from France and Brazil and see how they solve that situation, I think it's a fascinating dynamic to the whole thing.
Yeah, definitely. Like to draw on this as well. I think I was listening to this podcast by David McWilliams. He's a Irish economist. I was listening to his podcast. So
Yes,
the
I know
other
him well.
day,
Yeah,
yeah. So like he was so he's doing like a preview to the France Spain game and how um, Mbappe specifically has been a proper like he has been a proper barricade against the rising right wing the aspect which is rising in like especially in Marine Le Pen in France, and how it's very intriguing how the success of the French team could determine the results of the elections which could be happening just like next year. And it's so fascinating, like all these threads, and that's why I love sport as well, because it's not just what happens on the field. There are so many threads that just come out of it, and it just interweaves accordingly. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I'll give you one last example, Ashish. Right? There's a famous case of Declan Rice, England midfielder Declan Rice, who played 3 games for Ireland and then changed to England. Right?
Yeah.
Irish fans are driven, demented by this, and the only thing that drives them even madder than that is when I say that is entirely the right of Declan Rice to do that. Right?
Yeah.
Now, let's zoom out a little bit here. There's nobody who loves Irish football domestically, internationally, nationally more than what I do. This is my life's work: is watching this game, writing about it, trying to find the best ways to do things, to report these things back, to the world, but also to Ireland. Right?
Mm.
Nobody gets to define who Declan Rice is. Okay, Declan Rice gets to define himself, and not only that. Declan Rice playing for Ireland wanted to play for Ireland and was proud to play for Ireland, and that's fine. Declan Rice has the right to change his mind. Okay, so none of us are sort of stuck in it. It's like saying if you put on, you're wearing a German jersey at the moment there, but you were born and raised, as far as I know, in India, right? You get to do whatever you want. You get to cheer for whatever you want. You get to value and to appreciate whatever you want. And it drives me mad as well, because I would love to see Declan Rice still playing in green. What a team Ireland would have if Declan Rice, who played for Ireland, was there, if Harry Kane was there, if Wayne Rooney had a chosen Ireland. Half the English team, Jude Bellingham plays in Spain on an Irish passport because of one of his grandmothers. So they would have
Wow.
all been eligible to play for my Ireland. And yet they have chosen something differently. Do I like that? No. Do I respect it? Absolutely. And I defend that right that they have, because let no other man or woman define who you or I or Declan Rice is. And much and all as we don't like it, much and all as we can sort of, hate watch when England are playing and that kind of thing, we have to accept that that choice is theirs and theirs alone.
Yeah, definitely. So I think safe to say like both of us will be watching Norway's progress with a lot of interest. Like of course, like we
Oh,
would
yeah.
love to see them. Like I think and of course with Haaland becoming the star and sensation that he is, like the guy that he is, the character that he is, I like he was just he posted on his social media carrying like he made this Western shop in Dallas. Yeah. Dallas was super famous by just paying a few quid here and there, and then the sales are just booming for the shop, and he was asking people to name the stuffed raccoon, and like what a character! I genuinely love the guy. Like it's
Do
not
you
as
know?
if he was not famous earlier, but he just like exploded.
But you know what's brilliant about that as well, Ashish, is that like before this, when he signed for Manchester City, right, that was a time of huge turmoil for him and for his dad Alfie and that kind of thing. He's coming from Dortmund, very very famous, the biggest sports star, or the next probably the next biggest sports star. There's a guy called Petter Northug, who was a cross country skier, who is like the biggest athlete, and he's the kind of like bad boy kind of thing. Uh, and he talks a lot of trash in the newspapers and that kind of thing, especially towards Sweden. But Haaland had become this huge figure, but he didn't really wear it well. It was burdensome to him to have to talk, to have to represent. I remember the first time after he went to City and he came back to Oslo to play for the national team, and he found it very difficult. He found the attention very difficult, and now he seems to have let all that go. And he has become this sort of, almost an unwilling spokesperson for a generation. And yet he has done it so well. And the way he did it, it's amazing because of, he's just one of the lads. Okay. They told him, the team told him, and the coach told him, you don't have to do anything extra for us. You're already doing enough. You're scoring, 2 goals a game for us. We're good with that. They didn't force him out into a bunch of interviews and that kind of thing. Obviously, he did stuff for his sponsors and for the national team sponsors and the Football Federation sponsors and that kind of thing. But he didn't have to go over and above. Like, he did exactly what the rest of them did. And in that, he was able to find his sense of humor and to put across his personality, right? He's not going to sit there and have the conversation that we just had about ethnicity and about character and about how we define ourselves. That's not his thing, right? His thing is, he's a very humorous sort of a character, but he's also very inclusive. And he's also, very much about making himself the butt of jokes as much as making, he's not like Zlatan Ibrahimovic used to be. Zlatan always had to be a step above everybody else.
Yeah,
Holland isn't like that at all. He's a very modest sort of a character. And that part of him coming out now, and the really great thing about that is now that like I can't remember it, another soccer figure, another football figure who the Americans took to their heart in the
yeah,
same way as they had with Holland. Because Zlatan was there and that kind of thing. And people didn't really understand it. The Americans didn't really understand who this guy coming in here was, saying he was the greatest thing since sliced bread. But now Holland is coming in there, and with that sort of humor and humility, he's just done great things. And I honestly think that, when we look back at this, this is 2026, when we look back in 4 years' time or in 8 years' time, and we look at where the game is in America then, I think we'll pretty much be calling this like the Holland World Cup, and how he really embodied the values of football and the fact that it's a team game with some absolutely brilliant individual players in it.
yeah, definitely. Like it is fun to watch him, and he did, of course, he did perform as well. Like in his very first World Cup, first major tournament for the matter. Like to come with his like literally just filled his boots and just walked away a cult hero. Let's just say like in America and throughout the world as well. Like it is really fun to see, and like me being a very close follower of the Premier League as well. Like I mean, he was like very popular, and of course, but I think a lot of people consider them to be like this robotic goal scoring machine, and I think a lot of people have seen like this other side of him as just being this this nice down to earth lad, like you mentioned, like who loves to enjoy a little bit of a laugh, and like doesn't take himself too seriously, and that I think that's one aspect which people would find very endearing. I feel definitely.
Look, the post-match interviews are absolutely brilliant because
Yeah,
there's a certain things, right? When they get into, when you get into tournaments, and especially on match day -1, so that's the day before the game and the game itself. So as soon as the final whistle goes, there's a protocol that kicks off from FIFA there, right? And host broadcasters, so the broadcaster, the BBC, it might be the BBC in England, or it might be NRK or TV2 in Norway, and they have certain rights to interviews with coaches and players and that kind of thing. The players don't always have to do them, but people pretty much say these are the guys paying the money for these broadcast rights. This is why you're staying in this 5, 6 star hotel kind of thing. So
yeah,
we have to sort of serve them. But Holland twice came out, when they lost whatever 4-0 to France and or 4-1 to France, and Holland came out and says, gee, they'll probably win the whole thing. And somebody asked him, what are your chances against Brazil? He's going, oh no, they'll probably beat us. And just this sort of tongue-in-cheek kind of thing, going out there and lessening the expectations, lessening the pressure on his side, and then being able to go out there and do his thing. But there's two other things that are worth talking about with him, right? One is the fact that he really showcased his ability as a finisher, right? So many people have talked about Leo Messi, and I'm sure we get onto that now when we talk about Argentina and England in a minute, but the skill that Holland has, like his finishing is just incredible. There are no frills. There is never an extra touch where an extra touch isn't needed. And if I were a kid growing up now, and God knows I'm long, past those days, but if I was watching him play football, I would be going out, to the little green outside my house here in Stockholm and trying to do what he does, which is finish with one touch, finish like, no flourishes, no, just get that ball into the back of the net kind of thing. And like that was one of the things that really, really stood out about it. But the one sort of question that will always remain unanswered for me is he. Yeah. And the other thing that's worth thinking about is, and it's the great unanswered question of this World Cup when it comes to Haaland, is to me he looked really, really tired towards the end of the last couple of knockout games. They rested him obviously against France, which was a sign to me that okay, they need to, whatever readings they were getting off his, GPS and that kind of thing, that he really did need that break because he really wanted to score goals. He wanted to get 9, 10 goals, win the Golden Boot, and now that didn't happen. So I think if they could come into a tournament, with some way of, getting them to play 60 or 70 games in the club season and then playing an international tournament, then I think we'd see great things for him maybe at the next World Cup. But it was an incredible performance by him and the team to get that performance out of him.
Yeah, I think like just to end on this, I think like definitely it was a tough decision also for Stolbakken, right? To take, especially take him off in the second half of extra time. Definitely he would have helped. But I think he was nearing the red zone, right? Like that's why I think that's part of the reason why he had to take him off. Otherwise,
Well,
it
I
would have.
think against the Ivory Coast, he said he scored the winner late against the Ivory Coast. He said because he didn't want to go to extra time. And when he
Yeah,
scored the second goal against Brazil, he literally scored from the edge of the box because he didn't have the energy to run into the box. He just got the ball, just went whack, and he sent it into the side netting on the far side. And that. So getting late into games there, he didn't have the energy and the power that he usually has. So,
yeah,
and that's something they're going to have to look at and see, okay, how do we manage this guy in the future? Because they had to take him off. And there was an awful lot of people going, oh, how could you do it? He was done. He couldn't run. He
yeah.
couldn't do anything. And there is a risk then, that he'll end up, injuring himself or worse. And nobody wants to see that.
Yeah, so now let's transition into the semifinals. Both the semifinals is like a review of sorts. So, which one do you want to start off with? Do you want to,
Let's deal
start
with
with
Spain and
the,
France quickly because I
yeah,
think Spain and France will be a little bit quicker because it was just one of those brilliant things that, like, when just before we're going to have this conversation today, I was sort of thinking about, okay, let's look back over those games and see what happened. And it really was that sort of Spanish football coming full circle moment, And we looked at France's front four. We thought, okay, nobody's going to stop these guys. And it was just only then that we struck them. In order to score, they have to have the ball. And Spain just wouldn't let them have it. And they were so good, the Spaniards. And the fascinating thing now, and as we go into this weekend, if this comes out before the weekend, otherwise watch these games back again. Watch how the Spaniards play football and how they move in relation to where the ball is. Okay,
mm,
so the way they create and close space, open space, move around, the way they move the ball around within that, then to find that breathing room, because like they're always trying to create like a one-man advantage, create these sort of triangles that Johan Cruyff was so beloved of when playing total football with Ajax in the 70s with Rinus Michels and that. And that was the thing that actually beat France. And France just couldn't work it out. They could not sort of press them. Normally, when you're trying to press, you're trying to make the field smaller and smaller and smaller until the point where you win the ball. And France just could not manage to do that. And it wasn't for a lack of, good players or intelligent players. France just couldn't get close enough. And when you have very much, you have Olise, you have Dembele, you have king players. And it's not like they can't press. They know how to do this. But literally at one wrong step against Spain and then just keep playing the ball around you. And it's that thing of like, a little bit like what happened to England against Argentina as well. When you give the ball away, it could be 5 minutes before you're going to see that again. And then Spain were just so clinical in that game that, in a way, I'm quite surprised. I tipped France to win the whole thing because I simply thought that all they needed was to get on the ball once and find one little bit of space. But the other thing is that Spain's defense didn't allow them anything. They didn't allow them any space to play into whatsoever. And again, when we talk about England, we'll get into how that happens in a game. But Spain were so incredibly compact and so incredibly efficient. And now we're back to where they were in 2010 when they beat the Dutch in the final. They did exactly the same thing. It's so hard to remember the details of those games. And even for those, like, there was 4 or 5 years where Spain went through World Cups and European Championships, and they literally just held onto the ball. And then they scored with a tap in or a goal from, 8 meters out, 10 meters out, and that kind of thing. Very little spectacular about anything that they did. Maybe a penalty here, a 1-0 win there. But they were so incredibly dominant. And now the pendulum has come around again because we did go through an era there of gegenpressing that Jurgen Klopp brought us from his time in the Bundesliga in Germany. But it always goes, the athleticism, skill. And it's almost like an arms race between those two things. And now we're back to skill. Now we're back to a situation where I wonder what this Argentina team is going to do in the final without the ball, because if Spain just hold on to it like that, it could be a very, very long night in the New York, New Jersey stadium.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I think one point, like, I mean, I was kind of shocked by how neutered France were in that semifinal. Like, I mean, like also, see, it's one of two things. Okay, like definitely Spain were at their best, and I think Spain are kind of France's kryptonite in terms of the style of play and how they can counter France. And also, I think it's just that all of their star players just having a horrific game at the same time. And I think that was just, it was kind of anticlimactic because, even though I did think, Spain would give them their best, I mean, their biggest challenge in this tournament till now. It was a little bizarre, seeing it kind of felt like the entire French team was down with the flu and all of them were just recovering. And secondly, it's not as if like Spain were dominating the possession. It was like a 55-45 game. Like you would think like they had like a majority of the possession. I think their counter press was insane. Like little part of their counter press is the tactical fouling, and I am not a big fan of tactical fouling. I do think it's a big scourge in this game. Like there should be a little bit of a warning or a thing against that, maybe introduce a new card or a sin bin system. But I do think it's not the right way the game should go, like eventually. But definitely, I mean, that physicality, like they were kicking buckets out of Olise and took advantage of. I mean, I'm not saying the referee was bad, but probably he could have adjudicated some of those calls a little better. And of course, and also I do feel the game state also a little bit helped them. Getting that. I think up until they got the penalty, it was an even game. I don't think Spain were dominating as much. They were just, it was like here and there. And that
Yeah.
penalty just changed the thing. And I think a Spain team, when they have the lead, is like the best team in the world. There's nothing you can do to get past them, I think.
That's the thing, Ashish. And Spain looked so comfortable even when they didn't have the ball, you know?
Hmm.
So if you go back and you look at the statistics, it's like, like France didn't create that much. There was very few incidents in that, until the penalty when Spain took the lead there. You didn't look at it and think, oh, France are going to score at any minute now. Whereas towards the end of the Argentina-England game, you just knew
Yeah.
it was inevitable. Argentina created such pressure. France didn't manage to do that. And when
Yeah.
Spain managed to sit into that sort of back five there, they alternated between a back four and a back five, but they just closed off the space completely. And it's interesting what you said there, but the Spanish or the French team looking like they'd had the flu and we're all recovering together. One player can have a bad day, but when so many attacking players don't get anything at all out of the games,
Yeah.
then you know that the opponent has done something different, right? And the way they squeezed the life out of that. And what was interesting about the French, because Messi did it against England, right? He decided that I am not getting what I need centrally here. I'm not getting the ball I need. I'm not getting the space I need. I'm not getting the one-on-one matchup that I need. I'm going to move to the right wing. He took matters into his own hands. If I were Mbappe in that situation, I would have come much further out the field. Okay, I
Hmm.
would have gone into that sort of, that old sort of left half channel kind of thing there.
Yeah.
Open that up. Let Dembele move into the centre there, and see if you can create a sort of a one-on-one matchup there. Where he might be up. And Dembele has fantastic pace. Put him up against somebody, in the centre there, rather than coming in from the right wing, Spain's left. And that didn't really happen. And that to me is a sort of an illustration as well that one thing we talk about the Spaniards is their skill and possession, but it's also their intelligence when they're playing the game. They're capable of adapting, right? We looked at England, and Tuchel was saying, we didn't adapt after scoring the goal. We kept falling and falling and falling. Well, that's on two people. That's on the coach and the players, right? And if the players don't recognize that, it's up to the coach to say, okay, let's go in and let's do this differently. Spain make those adjustments on the fly. Like Luis de la Fuente, he doesn't have to stand up and say, guys, I need you to do. They
Yeah.
know what to do. They're so well educated in the game of football. They know what to do. And the way they killed space, because so often when France had possession, and you're entirely correct that, Spain had the majority of possession, but it wasn't that much more. But the difference was that when Spain had possession, they had options. Were those
Correct.
options always dangerous? No, but they were there all the same. All of France's options took them further from the goal. So, if they were going to do that, Spain were so compact. They didn't take the bait in any way whatsoever. So a run happens, okay, let them go. Doesn't matter. Just close down that space so that ball can't be played there. And that to me was the difference that, it was a difference in intelligence more so than skill or acumen or tactics there, and the ability of the Spaniards to make their decisions on the fly that saw them through to the final.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I just want to have a thought for William Saliba, who unfortunately went off in between as well. And today we just got the news that he was carrying a back fracture, and I'm like, how is he playing with a back fracture? It is like insane. Like these footballers, I tell you, man, like if I had a back fracture, I probably would I wouldn't be like I would be like on the bed like doing this with you, like
stretched
honestly
out
speaking.
for months on end. But this is the
Yeah,
thing: certain things you can play with. There are certain things now, and I don't know the extent of Saliba's injury, or I haven't seen any MRIs and that kind of thing. But there are certain things that you can play with and that you can get through and that kind of thing. And Saliba was, he was tremendous for France. He was
yeah.
absolutely instrumental, through the whole tournament of that. And sometimes you might have a little bit of pain, but that doesn't actually stop you from doing what you're trying to
Hmm.
do. But like it was, and in a way, I think it's actually interesting there because like France will have feel they will be leaving America thinking we left one on the table there. We had an extremely good chance to win another World Cup and we blew it. And
Yeah.
like they really should have gone from the final 4 years ago, whatever, like they should have been looking at the final 4 years ago. They should have been looking at this and going, okay, this is where we make amends. And they didn't manage to do that.
Yeah.
And that really should sting, especially for a player like Mbappe, who has gone, to Real Madrid and then all of a sudden PSG with the Champions League, that really should sting for somebody like that. And I think that, now that Deschamps is out of the way, I have always thought that Deschamps, rather than creating a situation for those players to excel in, that he has actually been a little bit of a handbrake for them. That with a better, more attacking coach, I mean, pick whoever you want, to put in there, but
I think
you
it's
shouldn't need to
most
tell those
likely to be
players to.
Zidane. It's probably most likely to be Zidane, I'm guessing.
And that would be brilliant because I don't think
Yeah.
anybody, and again, we talked about the cultural context of football, and I don't think that anybody understands that better than Zinedine Zidane. Put him in there. He also, his voice carries weight in a dressing room. He's been there, he's done it all. French football was sort of in the doldrums when he came into the national team, delivered a World Cup in 1998 on home soil and that kind of thing. Nobody has done more for the game in that country than that. And I do think that he will look at those attacking players and say, okay, how do we facilitate that? But also when we talk about that intelligence thing, because you have to empower players to make those decisions I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
If you put players in there with the English team in that cultural context, the English team should be told, get rid of that ball at all costs, right? Just get rid of it. Dan Burn, that's why they were bringing him on in games, right? Zidane doesn't need to do that. Zidane needs to say to his players, get your foot on the ball, use your quality to beat them. That's it. I think, if he was to get the job, I think you might see them go a step further and maybe make the final in 4 years' time.
Yeah, like and kind of strange. Like I mean, just to speak about Deschamps as well. Like I think the entire tenure as well. I think like, any other manager having that, it would be considered a success, right? He's reached three semi-final. I mean, two finals, one final. Reached a semi-final. We reached a quarter-final. That was, I think, his first tournament. I think the one missed opportunity would have been like the lack of success in the Euros, like for whatever reason. Like I think that is where probably that would be the probable black mark against his career. But any other coach, his World Cup series, I think, unparalleled. And I think it'll be interesting to see them transition from Deschamps to Zidane. Like, oh, I mean, supposedly Zidane. Like we don't know
Yeah.
it most likely to be him. Let's put it that way.
Well, I think when we sum up his time in control of France, I think that's he kind of managed the game the way he played the game, and that was very
Hmm.
risk averse and that kind of thing. It's like, okay, don't do anything until you get the ball over the halfway line, and after that, I don't even understand what you do when you get over the halfway line. So work away, guys. You solve this by yourselves. And while that worked to a certain extent, I mean, we said it about Norway earlier on. There, it's like, okay, what was the expectation here? What was reasonable for us to expect from Norway? And I think, making it through to the last 16 was absolutely my expectation was at least making there. Then making the quarterfinal, to me, that's exceeding expectations. And had they
Bonus, yeah.
beaten England, that definitely would have done so. With Deschamps, the bar so because he has a squad of 26 guys. All of those players will go into pretty much all of the squads of any of the other countries in the World Cup,
Hmm.
And like maybe the third choice goalkeeper might make it, but that's probably about it. He had so many brilliant players to put in there. And that's why that you got to say that maybe they underachieved by not making the final because the whole world was in awe of that attacking
Yeah,
core.
definitely.
And that's really why you have to look at that and say maybe. But then again, it does give us something to look forward to. We're going to be in a week's time. We'll be into the Euros qualification cycle, and then we'll see what a Zidane or anybody else can do with
Yeah, definitely. Now we move on to, I think, the more dramatic of the semifinals, like so to speak. Like I think you were definitely, rooting against England. I think that was the first and last game in which I was rooting for England. Like the whole reason. Okay, like let me give context. The whole reason why I was supporting England is one, I really didn't like the whole Argentinian thing, and I was like, I find them to be. I don't like other than Messi, I don't like the other 10 players, so to speak. They're a little bit, they are what they are. Secondly, I was like thinking from the long term perspective, like what would be more funnier? England reaching a final and then bottling it, that would be the most funniest outcome, and that's what I was looking at. And fair to say, like I probably should have considered, supporting them, maybe a couple, 2, 3 rounds earlier. Like probably that's what was needed, probably. Like we wouldn't have been in this situation. But yeah, see, I want to say I'm surprised, but I'm not really surprised. Like this is like people jokingly say, right? This is the DNA of a particular country, but this is the DNA of England. Like they've not really they will to the slightest opposition or resistance to them, and it's kind of bizarre how they just keep failing at different points, and like they've brought in different managers, they've had multiple generations of players, and it's just the same old. But I mean,
Mm.
but in this case, I do feel like Tuchel was a big major reason why England got knocked out. And even the entire tournament, I didn't think he coached a good tournament, and I did think that he just was up to par, at least compared to what Southgate did in the prior tenure.
Well, if we can say that Norway overachieved by making it to the quarterfinals, England underachieved by making it to the third place playoff, because that was, like I've never seen a tactical disaster like the second half that Tuchel authored there. That was just absolutely incredible. It's just mind blowing how he managed to get every single decision wrong. And this really speaks to a bigger problem, Ashish, in English football, right? So they win the World Cup in 1966, right? And that was both the best and the worst thing that ever happened to that nation. Because let's remember that England didn't even go to the first World Cup because they were going,
Yeah,
this the World Cup. Who are these lads playing football? We are the creators of this game. We are the
exactly.
keepers of the flame of this game, kind of thing. And then all of a sudden, time went on. They were going, hang on a second, this is becoming a thing, and we haven't been invited to the party. So let's start going. And then when they did start going, they realized that okay, this is not as easy as what we might have thought. And that was where when I talk about the cultural context of football, Argentina and Brazil and Germany and all these other countries had started to create their own football and culture. Even in Sweden and Norway, they'd start to create their own football and cultures at that point. And that's what the World Cup is. It's like, the global clash of football and cultures. And that's where we see, okay, is it going to be Spanish tiki taka, or is it going to be the Argentinian sleight of hand, that slightly nasty elbow in the ribs, stamping your foot in the corner kind of thing, and then a piece of brilliance from Messi? Where are we at in the world at this particular time? England, to me, have been denying who they are for so long. Okay, England are absolutely desperate to play with the flair of Brazil and Spain and these countries, and they just don't have it. Okay, certain players will have it. Jude Bellingham, for me, probably the best player in the tournament apart from Messi. Okay,
Yeah,
absolutely tremendous. You disagree with me there, but like Bellingham to me has been absolutely fantastic. Harry Kane has been absolutely
yeah,
fantastic. But for England, you don't play the game in your own half. You don't sit there and soak up pressure. Again, I go back to Jack Charlton, who used to manage the Republic of Ireland from 1986, who took them to 2 World Cups. He always talks not about soaking up pressure, but about putting pressure on the opposition. It was one of the most famous things. There's actually an Irish football song called Put 'em Under Pressure, because that's what Jack said to do, right? He was centre back in the team that won the World Cup in 1966. Lads, are we seeing a pattern here, right? These are the kinds of people. When I talk about the keepers of the flame of English football, that is what English football should be doing, right? So when you have John Stones and you have Jed Spence and you have whoever else is defending there, anybody putting a ball into that box and trying to play it as the opposition should be taking their life in their hands, right? You should absolutely not accept an Argentina coming into your half of the field and playing ball against you. You should be there. And if you go in, you dive into a tackle and you miss it and Messi goes by, the next guy in line should be there, and the next guy and the next guy. It demands a huge amount of physical energy. It demands concentration. It demands so many things. But what it demands most of all is that you be true to yourself in your own footballing culture. And that is not knocking the ball around among the back row and probing for openings and that kind of thing. That is playing football as if your pants were on fire. That's how England should be playing the game. Defending as if your life depended on it, and then counter-attacking or attacking, pushing men forward, throwing people forward into that. And Tuchel's whole idea, and I kind of knew this was going to happen before the tournament even started, Ashish, because look at who he left out.
yeah,
He did not trust Cole Palmer, Trent Alexander-Arnold, who to me is the epitome of that kind of play. The closest to a sort of a technical footballer who absolutely gives us all physically, is Trent Alexander-Arnold. I don't think he's a great defender, but that's not what he's there for. He's there to play, to lift the crowd, to create, to mess up things where he can. Kobe Mine, who sat on the bench the whole thing. When you needed a player to put his foot on the ball, you're bringing on Ivan Toney. It's like, what are you doing this for, right? The first changes that you make, you score a goal, and the next thing you're making defensive changes. You're saying that your team is sinking too low, and then what you're saying to them is, instead of saying to them, we need to move up the pitch, we need to start to attack, we need to get our foot on the ball, which they're more than capable of doing. You bring on Dan Burn, and you go, okay, lump these balls in there, right? And that's fine. Tuchel looked at the game that they had against Mexico. I said, okay, that worked then. Okay, Mexico don't have Leo Messi. What Mexico didn't have and what Argentina had was, you can cross the ball into the box all you want, right? I go back
Yeah.
to David Moyes had a game as Manchester United manager. I think they hit like 70 crosses into the
Yeah, yeah.
box.
The most
Yeah,
famous game of his
yeah,
the
exactly.
nadir of
And
his
everything was
career.
just cleared. It was against West Ham, I can't remember. But
Yeah,
everything was just cleared, cleared, cleared because they lacked precision, right? This man over here is Leo Messi. I don't know if you've heard of him, but for the last 20 odd years, this man can put a ball through the eye of a needle, right? And not only that, that we looked at this because Messi's also 39 years old. The first couple of attempts he put in there, we had one header that Pickford saved. There was another that was offside,
yeah,
I think. And he was telling us what he was trying to do. So when he went and he found that space out there, and let's not forget, he hit the cross for the winning goal with his right foot, which apparently is
exactly.
only for standing on, if you believe the football analysts. He's never going to go that direction. He's always going to go to his left. No, he solved the equation as it was in front of him. And to me, that is absolutely, the talk in the English media. I was just listening to is it the overlap or stick to football or whatever? I love listening to Roy Keane when England lose. It's just so funny. He just enjoys it even more than I do. But the tactical analysis of that, and saying, that, and he did make the point. It's like, this is, and Peter Crouch saying the same thing. This is one of the greatest players of all time. So him putting crosses into the box is not the same thing as you or me putting crosses into the box. And you're also putting the ball into the box for proven strikers, guys who've scored goals at the Champions League level. They've won Serie A. They've won, they've been there and they've done this thing before. It is only a matter of time. If you sit back, and I think Martina Navratilova, the tennis player, said that, the surest way to lose is to play not to lose. And England played not to lose. And the sad thing about that, Ashish, is to go out, if the Norwegians went out on their sword and were limited by the depth of their squad and their physical limitations, that kind of thing, England didn't. The tactical cowardice of Tuchel was an absolute shame for this competition, right? Because I want to see England beaten, but I don't want to see them fold that way. I want to see them beaten by a better team. I don't want to see them beaten by their own hand. And again, we're into this situation now where there is going to be a changing of the guard in England, right? Harry Kane is not the player that he once was. As I say, one of their best players at this tournament, but that's mostly, it's almost subtraction by addition. The people that they left behind could maybe have done a better job. But I don't see another centre forward, an old-fashioned England number 9, going back to, Jeff Hurst or Alan Shearer or Ian Wright or Les Ferdinand or all these great players that they've had through the years. I don't see where that's going to come from. And without that English football, without that sort of, star on the top of your Christmas tree, English football is a little bit lost. So what I'm wondering now is what they're going to do. Because to me, I don't think that England should be trying to be Belgium, which is what they've been trying to do for several years, or trying to play a little bit like the Dutch in their own half of the field and then be something different there. They need to admit who they are. They need to admit the limitations that they have. And actually, one final thing about this, right? I was speaking to Dion Dublin, the former Aston Villa and Manchester United player. He was in Vancouver for some of the games. We were having a chat about this, and we were speaking on just before the last game that we saw in Vancouver. I was talking to him about how in his career he was a centre forward, great goal scoring centre forward for Aston Villa and for Coventry City and these good teams. But
Norwich
at the
as
end of
well,
his
right?
career, he became and he became a centre back, and he was
Yes,
saying I loved it because when I'm a centre forward, I have to do everything exactly right to score a goal. When I'm a centre back, I just have to get a touch on something, and I can
exactly.
just spoil it for the other fella. I just have to get my butt between the ball and the goal, and I'm a hero. That's not the same thing for a centre forward. And what England really need to do, and it will break my heart when they realise this themselves, because they will win World Cups and European championships, when they realise that the answers don't lie elsewhere, they lie within themselves, within their own footballing history and their own footballing culture. But it takes courage to look at the way the rest of the world does things and to say, okay, they're successful doing that, and not to follow that path. To say, we are England, we need to do things our way. And the moment they do that is the moment they will solve this problem. But so far, and certainly not in this World Cup, they haven't been able to do that.
Yeah, and if you were to even look at the pattern also of teams who've done well in this World Cup and teams who've not done well, like take Germany. Germany have gone away from their, the very essence of German football, right? Where, they're very hard to play against. They don't, they're not, they're very efficient, very brutally efficient. Whereas, I mean, English football, see, the thing with English football as well, for the matter, I don't know whether they have like a very particular homogeneous identity. Like, I mean, I think you did mention it, like with the fact that they have like they're a very physical team. They are very reliant in, create like putting pressure on the opposition as well as that. But that is also a little bit tricky. And the point you made about the center forward, yeah, I am like I'm shuddering to think who's going to be like the starting center forward for England in in the 2030 World Cup. But yeah, it will be interesting to see, and yeah, definitely will be. Um, I don't know, like one more thing, like I'm a Chelsea fan, so I did undergo the Tuchel cycle, so to speak, and I do know his playbook. I kind of find what he said in the post match of the debacle, the semi-final debacle, to be very cold and not taking responsibility for what his part to play in that entire thing. And I did kind of see that towards the end of his Chelsea tenure as well. And he has a kind of bit of a spiky personality, and we did see that right in that whole post-match interview with ITV. I think in the win against Norway as well. Like he said something, and then Bellingham was supposed that. I mean, I do think that I mean, English broadcasters are a little bit. They are out there to get the sensational headlines, so to speak, but he should be handling such stuff better. That's what I would say.
Well,
Like I maybe you would differ, but I just say
no. I mean, I waited for about it was maybe an hour and a half, because like I have the FIFA feed for the press conferences, and I wanted to see what Thomas Tuchel had to say, and I
mm,
really felt that he threw the players under the bus when he
yeah,
did that. He's talking about they sank too low, they sank too low. Well, tell them not to. You're literally standing like a few meters from them. Tell them not to do that. You're the coach. And then you send on defensive players. And I'm sorry, but that's a signal to your team that we're not
exactly.
looking to attack now. We're looking to defend what we have. So
Consolidate.
if you want to complain about others and that kind of thing, I really thought he handled the aftermath of it very, very badly indeed. But again, it comes back to there's a big difference between, if you have a foreign manager who comes in from outside, and this is why Graham Potter is going to be such a great manager for Sweden. He understands Swedish football and the psyche, and he respects that. Thomas Tuchel doesn't, right? He understands the problems of English football, but he's trying to make German solutions for them, right? And this
Mm,
is the same thing that's happened to Germany themselves at this point. They're talking about Jurgen Klopp coming in and taking over. That would be absolutely brilliant for German football because there's no more German person, no more German coach, no person. I mean, he created modern German football essentially. If you look at how Dortmund play and you look at how Bayern Munich play and that. So, but Tuchel doesn't get that. And he's sort of sitting there thinking that, I sent out these guys to do something and they didn't do it. Yeah, well, then you're sending them out to do the wrong thing. If they're not capable of doing what you as coach are telling them, then it's not the fault of the players. That is the fault of you, right? And the same thing happened to Graham Potter as well. He tried a couple of little things that didn't quite work out. But the more he immerses himself in this and he sort of gets the idea that, okay, this is what these players are capable of doing in this given moment, because if you go to a Spanish team, right? If I take over Spain in the morning and say, okay, lads, football is changing. We're going to get a big number 9 who's like 2 meters tall, and we're just going to hoop the ball up to him. What am I doing? Like their entire education is just thrown out the window. And that's effectively what Tuchel is trying to do. Like the last question I'm walking away from this World Cup with is, who are England tactically? And I can't answer that question because I'm watching. I was like, okay, what are you trying to do here, right? I can tell you exactly what Spain are trying to do. Spain are trying to get the ball into the space behind the immediate defender. That's the only thing that they're trying to do. And they will literally walk that ball. A Spanish goal, tactically, the greatest Spanish goal of all time is literally scored from 2 meters out because they've gotten behind and they just got a toe poke into the back of the net. That I know exactly who they are. The same thing goes for Argentina. They want to get Messi on the ball, and the runs and the timing of those runs and everything else like that is tactically superb stuff. England, I have no idea what you're trying to do. Is Jude Bellingham the person that you're playing through? Is Harry Kane the person you're playing through? Who is it? What's the point? What's the purpose of your game here? And if over the course of 5 or 6 matches, football matches, we can't work out what you're trying to do, then that means that you're trying to do an awful lot of different things. And I saw a lot. I love watching Murat Yakin's Switzerland team because I've known him for so long that I know what he's trying to do before he does it himself. And the way he switches from a 4 at the back to a 5 at the back to a tight 5 that only plays between the lines of the penalty area, doesn't go out the wings. I find all that fascinating. Does he play three in the midfield? Does he press with one or two up front? And I love watching it because I know the patterns that he plays to. I know what he's asking his players to do. I have no idea what Thomas Tuchel is trying to do with that England team. And that to me, as we look forward to third place playoff, this could get really embarrassing tomorrow. So as we're talking, it's the night before the third place playoff. You have France coming up there. And France are going to be stung. I think France are going to be the team with most to prove, right? I don't think that any French team is going to want to go out there and be beaten by England and come fourth in this World Cup after them being expected to win the whole thing. I honestly expect it. Kylian Mbappe could absolutely go off before he heads for a beach for a week before coming back for preseason. I think he could absolutely go off against England, and there's very little they can do to stop him.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think this will also be Deschamps' like last game as well, right? There will be the motivation as well to send him off on a high, right? Like there is that as well. And I mean, I think say okay, I confess I love the third place playoff because it is the perfect game. So like a lot of goals fly in the third place playoff because the teams are not really bothered about defending as much. And I think that's one aspect of it which I like. And secondly, also, I think it's also like for these, unexpected nations which reach the semi-final, it is a chance for them to get a medal, and it's always been there. It's not like a new novelty which is introduced. It's always been there throughout World Cup history. It's not like something new. And I think a third place playoff is also kind of important. Like, it's good to know among the final four teams where you stand, and I think that's why I love the novelty of the third place playoff. So yeah, yeah.
I've long been a proponent of Ashish. I've always wanted to see it introduced into the European Championships and that kind of thing because you have it in the World Cup and you have it in the Olympic soccer tournaments because obviously there has to be a bronze medal.
Yeah.
And I think it's really good because it's a great scene setter and it answers an awful lot of the questions that we as observers and fans have. Right? Okay, England and France. Okay, so what would they have done if they had made it to the final? What have they got left in the tank? Who
Yeah.
are the better teams, the better players, the better tactics, the better ideas? And like I love to get the answers to those questions. And I remember when was it? Was it 78? I was 7 years old in 1978 when Argentina won the World Cup. And then in the European Championships, then a couple of years later, I was thinking, okay, why is there no third place playoff? Because, like you, I'm a huge fan of that game. And so many players think that it's really difficult. If you ask them straight after losing the semi final, they just want to go to the bar, they want to go home or go to the beach or
Yeah.
something. But when you look back at 1994, which is when the last time the World Cup was held in North America, and the Swedes won that, they beat was it Bulgaria 4-0, I think, I can't remember, but they won the
Yeah.
third place playoff anyway, and they were delighted with themselves because they came third in the World Cup. Joint third, meh.
Yeah.
That's when you've gone out there, it actually feels like you've won a bronze medal rather than
Yeah.
just you got one because you lost the semi final. So I think
Exactly.
it's quite an important game, and I think for the French and for the English, this is not how they round out this World Cup. This is how they start the next period, the next chapter leading into European qualification. I think there's a lot of confidence to be won there. And I also think it's a great opportunity for the likes of Tuchel to give guys like Kobe Mino and these kind of guys and say, look, okay, put these guys onto the field. Let them have their run. Let them say that they have been World Cup footballers. I spoke to New Zealand left back Francis de Vries. He played two games, I think, at left back. He came on as a substitute. And once you've done that and your name has been on the team sheet, nobody can ever take that away from you. And this is one of those things in building for the future. So maybe Kobe Minu doesn't start the third place playoff. But if you bring him on for a half an hour and you give him that experience of this big game kind of thing, because so far all his experience has been had in a tracksuit top, and that's really not the same thing as being out there in the cauldron and trying to win a knockout game against another team. So I really hope that both teams take it seriously. But like I say, I think France may take it slightly more seriously than Thomas Tuchel's may.
Yeah, definitely. And then let's end this episode with our thoughts on the final. I think this meeting is also going to expire in approximately 6.5 minutes. So let's keep it like 4 minutes. I think we have our thoughts. I think we've spoken about the teams also indirectly. So let's what are your predictions and how do you think the game is going to go?
So I have sort of swung a little bit over the last week or 10 days or so because I honestly thought that Messi was too old. And then I see what he did the other night against England and how he just decided, no, we're not losing this game. Who's with me, fellas? And they went out there and they did it. And then I thought about Spain as well. The tiki-taka thing that was like, they've kind of gone back to where they were 16 years ago. I thought, okay, that's old hat. They're going to get found out now. Somebody's just going to play through them. And now it's an actual sort of perfect match where these two go up against one another. And I think that's going to be fascinating. And I do think at the moment I'm sort of leaning towards that sort of romantic notion. that Leo Messi goes out there and that he still has, like Elvis in Las Vegas in the 1970s, that he has one last great show, one last great blowout in him. Because, we thought that 4 years ago, 2022, when he won the World Cup, that was it. That was all he needed. He
Yeah,
was done. And now he's back on the same stage again. And if there's one thing that's better, especially in the eyes of the Argentinian people, if there's one thing better than winning the World Cup once, it's winning it twice. So while Spain are playing for a World Cup title and to reassert themselves on the world stage, Messi is playing for legacy, right? I think
mm,
if Argentina win the World Cup final on Sunday, we're not going to hear the Messi Ronaldo debate ever again. That one will be over for all time. And
I
it
think it
doesn't
was
matter if
already over.
Ronaldo gets,
It
yeah,
was
if
already
Ronaldo gets
over.
1,000 goals or whatever. Nobody cares. Messi will clearly have been not just the greatest footballer of this generation, but the greatest footballer of any generation.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's it's kind of bizarre when you see Messi just uh, like he's just a magician, and uh, I think like just to like I think I'm privileged to have been alive in the time that Messi has like I mean my entire football watching like I've been watching football for like 20 years now, and that's approximately been the size of his career as well, the length of his career as well. And I think I've seen a lot of his career. I think I've seen every season of his career, like except the ones in MLS because I mean I really don't. I'm not really that fussed to watch the MLS. Sorry to say, but yeah, man, it's so the way he's just able to conjure up these small moments of magic out of nothing, and it's just insane. Like and see, like the rational part of me thinks Spain has this covered. They've been a machine like surely now Argentina cannot escape this time against such a good team. But then I remember, okay, they literally have a goat. The goat is just going to come up with something like he'll maybe in the game against Spain he'll just come up with a looping header which would be an assist for like Alvarez or something like that. So like I'm not even putting that into the thing. So like I cannot like put anything beyond him. Like he's just legendary. Like honestly.
But that's what makes him so great is that ability to do those things. Like, when you're playing football and guys run at you with the ball and you look at an angle, you go, oh, I hope he doesn't see that. Messi sees it. And,
Yeah.
he can get the ball there. And he'll always do the split second before. I remember probably the best footballer I ever played against was Robert Pires, who won the World Cup with France. And I remember thinking, like, he was just so far ahead of me every single second we played. It was in Ukraine in 2012, and he was just a split second ahead of me. And and much as I could see I know what he's going to do. There's nothing I can do to stop him.
Yeah.
And that's what it's like playing against Messi. Pires was a brilliant dribbler as well, like Messi. And that's the thing that Spain are faced with. And I don't know, haven't watched them against England now, haven't watched them bring them back from the death from the dead so many times in this World Cup, and I just feel that he has one more of them left. And you know what? I'm here for that too, right? If that's the way we're going to round it out, that's there's a beauty and a poetry in him finishing up with another World Cup win.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's fair to say, like, we'll have to wind up this episode here. It has been a very special time having you on this on our podcast for these, I mean, 4 episodes. They've been really special. We've gone through a lot of storylines on the field, and of course, a lot of the human interest stories off the field as well. And I just want to say thank you. And like Sai, definitely, she's been very curious to come on these episodes. Actually, it's just that her work is also she's been a little bit tired from work and she's not been able to join. So there is that as well. But yeah, but thank you so much. And guys, please do like and subscribe. And like Philip has been like a gem of a person. Like that's all I would say.
Thank you so much for having me on, and I look forward to the European Championships or whenever we speak again the next time, Ashish.